Hey, Cobbs Corner fam. Before I start this episode, I would just like to first acknowledge the passing of several celebrities. Several celebrities have passed away since we've last spoke, since our last episode. I'd like to acknowledge the passing, first and foremost, of Fat Man Scoop. I mean, I'm sure all of us have probably heard one or two of his songs at parties and in the club, whether if it was Drop or Be Faithful, So R.I.P. to Fat Man Scoop. Your music will forever be played in parties, clubs across the world, as well as James Earl Jones. Rest in power, I should say, to James Earl Jones. He unfortunately passed away at the age of 93. Healthline says after a long battle with diabetes. So, James Earl Jones, I think there's a theater that's been named after him. He's the voice of Mufasa, the voice of Darth Vader, Field of Dreams, Welcome Home Roscoe Jenkins, rest in power, James Earl Jones. Fat Man Scoop, unfortunately, went into cardiac arrest while performing in my home state of Connecticut. He was in Hampton, Connecticut, and he unfortunately went into cardiac arrest during the free performance, during a free concert. So, our thoughts and prayers are with the families of James Earl Jones, Fat Man Scoop, as well as Frankie Beverly. The song Before I Let Go is I feel like that song is played at every family reunion, every cookout. Just, R.I.P. Frankie Beverly. He unfortunately passed away at the age of 77. Lastly, I'd like to acknowledge the passing, just this past Sunday, the passing of Tito Jackson, member of the Jackson 5, musician, guitarist. He unfortunately died at the young age of 70 due to, again, a medical emergency. So, on behalf of the entire Cobbs Corner family, I'd like to extend my deepest condolences to the friends and families of Fat Man Scoop, James Earl Jones, Frankie Beverly, and Tito Jackson. That being said, on with today's episode. You risk your skin catching killers, and the juries turn them loose so they can come back and shoot at you again. If you're honest, you're poor your whole life, and in the end, you wind up dying all alone on some dirty street. For what? For nothing. For a tin star.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.
Hello, Cobbs Corner family, and welcome to another episode of Cobbs Corner, your one-stop shop for all things TV, film, and pop culture. If this is your first time listening, then welcome, and to my returning listeners, welcome back. This is the 86th episode of Cobbs Corner, so thank you for listening and sharing this broadcast. On today's episode, the AFI series is taking me to the Wild Wild West with number 27, High Noon. Stay tuned. Introduction. A town marshal, despite the disagreements of his newlywed bride and the townspeople around him, must face a gang of deadly killers alone at high noon, when the gang leader, an outlaw he sent up years ago, arrives on the noon train. Storyline. On the day he gets married and hangs up his badge, Marshal Will Kane is told that a man he sent to prison years before, Frank Miller, is returning on the noon train to exact his revenge. Having initially decided to leave with his new spouse, Will decides he must go back and face Miller. However, when he seeks the help of the townspeople he has protected for so long, they turn their backs on him. It seems Kane may have to face Miller alone, as well as the rest of Miller's gang who are waiting for him at the station. This movie is directed by Fred Zinnemann. He's known for directing A Man for All Seasons, From Here to Eternity, and The Nun Story. The movie is co-written by Carl Foreman and John W. Cunningham. Carl Foreman is known for his work on The Guns of Navarone, The Bridge on the River Kwai, which is number 36 on the AFI Top 100, so stay tuned for that episode in the near future, along with Young Winston. John W. Cunningham is known for his work on Day of the Bad Man and The Stranger Wore a Gun. The movie stars Gary Cooper as our leading man, Marshall Will Kane. I guess the male protagonist, the male lead, Marshall Will Kane. You've seen Gary Cooper play Robert Jordan in For Whom the Bell Tolls, Alvin C. York in Sergeant York, and Longfellow Deeds Semple in Mr. Deeds Goes to Town. Grace Kelly stars as Amy Fowler Kane. She is known for playing Margot Wendis in Dial M for Murder, Frances Stevens in To Catch a Thief, Lisa Fremont in Rear Window, which is number 48 on the AFI Top 100, so stay tuned for that episode in the near future, and Georgie Elgin in The Country Girl. Lastly, Thomas Mitchell stars as Mayor Jonas Henderson. You've seen Thomas Mitchell play Doc Josiah Boone in Stagecoach, Uncle Billy in It's a Wonderful Life. That is number 20 on the AFI Top 100. Stay tuned for that episode in the near future. Gerald O'Hara in Gone with the Wind, number 6 on the AFI Top 100. And if you remember from our last episode, he played Diz Moore in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. That was number 26 on the AFI Top 100. So once you're done listening to this episode, go back and listen to that episode. Go back and listen to episode 85. So without any further ado, let's go to Cobbs Corner. So, as previously mentioned in the intro, the movie follows Marshall Will Kane, who, again, is played by Gary Cooper. And Marshall Will Kane, he has been the marshal in this town. I'm not sure if they ever specify the name of the town or where this place is located, or where this place is located, what state, what territory. But we do know that it takes place in the West. They do specify that it's a territory. I'm not entirely sure which one. But this sheriff, Marshall Will Kane, he has just gotten married, and it is his plan to, now that he is married to his wife, to his now wife, Amy Fowler Kane, played by Grace Kelly, it is their plan to leave the town behind. And he's hanging up his badge, and there's going to be a new marshal coming in the next day. So he's kind of ready to transition to the next stage of his life. Come to find out, and we see this trio in the beginning of the film. Come to find out that Frank Miller, who was a criminal that Marshall Kane had thrown, a criminal that Marshall Will Kane had put in prison years prior, and then he was then sent up north, as I refer to it as, they refer to him as being sent up to the north and then tried in their courts, but then either the conviction was overturned, or he was let loose out of jail or prison, and now he has come back. He's come back to this town for revenge. He finds out that Frank Miller will be coming at noon. He'll be coming into town on the noon train, and being that Marshall Kane's wife Marshall Kane's wife, Amy, is a Quaker. Now, bit of context: the Quakers, they were one of the founding, well, I guess not the founding groups of the United States, but they were among the first settlers, the first European settlers to come and settle in what was at that point just North America. And Quakers, like if you've ever eaten Quaker oatmeal, the person on the logo for Quaker Oats is William Penn, the founder of Pennsylvania, the founder of the state of Pennsylvania. So William Penn, he was a Quaker. I think some of our, not founding fathers, but some of the early settlers were Quakers, and they were very well-known pacifists. You know, the Quakers, even during the American Revolution, they were opposed to war in all forms. They were opposed to fighting, opposed to owning guns, any sort of conflict. They were notoriously against. And so Amy, being a Quaker, she wants to run away with her husband. And initially they do actually start to escape, but then as they're leaving in the horse carriage, Marshall Kane, he just realizes that he has to stay and fight. He says, I have to stay, and I gotta round up troops. I gotta stay, and I gotta round up deputies. I have fought for this town, and I need the people in this town to now fight for me, to now help me save this town. And essentially Amy does not like this idea, and she ends up waiting at a hotel for the noon train. Marshall Kane goes back. He goes back to town, and he is trying to round up. He's trying to round up folks to actually put together an actual like force of like him and his deputies to actually stand their ground and like fight to protect this town. And in classic American film fashion, nobody steps up. Even after the townspeople elected him marshal, and after he protected that town and fought for that town for so long, now that it's time for the townspeople to return the favor, everybody says no. Everybody says no, and the thing I like about this movie is it's almost a real-time movie. Like, the movie is only about, I want to say, 85 minutes, like an hour and 25 minutes, so it's really not that long. And the movie starts around like 10:30, I think. So it's, for the most part, real time. For the most part, the pacing of the movie is almost synchronous with the movie's actual runtime. So throughout the film, we see Marshall Kane going to different people in town, going to the different saloons, and everyone just kind of writes him off as like, you're crazy, don't you know Frank Miller, he's got friends in this town. And he even goes to the mayor, and the mayor says, or not the mayor, the judge. He goes to the judge and says, or no, maybe it was the mayor, played by Thomas Mitchell, Jonas Henderson, and tells him how, like, you convicted him right in that chair over there, and it's like, we sent him up north, and now he's coming back. So it seems as if Marshall Kane is like on his own in this particular case. But then one of the characters, Helen Ramirez, who's played by Katie Jurado, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that last name, but Mrs. Ramirez, she owns a store. She owns a store in the town, and she decides that she's leaving. She says how Frank Miller is coming and he is going to destroy this town. Well, he is going to kill Will Kane and when Will Kane dies, this town will die as well. So she offers someone to buy out her store for, initially she says like $2,000, but then she ends up settling on $1,000 and then pay me the rest in 6 months. So she's ready to go, and she even at one point gives a bit of a pep talk to Amy Kane, and we realize that Helen Ramirez and Marshall Kane actually have history, that the two of them even dated for a while before Marshall Kane and Amy started dating and got married. So Helen tells Amy, like, if I were his wife, if he were my husband, I would stand by him and I would support him, and I would stand by him, I would support him, although he is not my husband. So that is your job to stand your ground and stand by your husband and fight with him, even though, again, Amy is, Quaker, 100% like anti-violence. Marshall Kane, he even goes into the local church to try to recruit folks, and there's a lot of like back and forth dialogue about, it's like, oh well, the firepower that these guys have, we wouldn't stand a chance. And like a lot of the men in this town are not stepping up to the plate, and the women are kind of calling them like cowards and such, saying how like you need to step up to the plate and actually defend this town. There was one deputy, Deputy Marshal Harvey Pell, Harvey, who he was actually ready to defend the town with Marshall Kane. I guess Deputy Marshal, first responders and like police officers help me out here, and feel free to like correct me if I'm wrong in the comments section below. But it's my understanding that like Deputy Marshal is like second in command to the Marshal, and so Deputy Marshal Harvey was ready to go and help Marshall Kane defend the town, only to find out that Deputy Marshal Harvey is the only one defending the town. And then Harvey even bails. He even like takes off his star. He takes off his star and he says, I be ready to go, but I have no stake in this. This is not my fight. I have a family. You're on your own, essentially. And Marshall Kane, he even tells him, go home. Like you have no reason to stay. Deputy Marshal Harvey, he's saying how like he would have stayed if there were more people, if it were more than just the two of them. So here we have Marshall Kane on his own, and as I was watching this movie, I kind of was having flashbacks to 300, which I might do in a future episode. 300, the movie is, 300 is a movie I've always said that it's like very historically inaccurate. Like it's a great movie, but it's also not a primary source of information. So many creative liberties were taken. Shout out to Zack Snyder. I can't wait to have you on the podcast. But the way that the Athenians and like the other Greek city-states and like Sparta's neighbors, the way that like their neighbors had essentially abandoned them at the battle of Thermopylae, and 300 Spartan soldiers faced off against, like, I feel like it was maybe 5,000 Persian soldiers, like the Persian Empire. There was the Persian Empire versus those 300 Spartan soldiers, and unfortunately the Spartan soldiers lost, yet they stood their ground. Now, I do think that it's a bit different with High Noon. I mean, these are two different films. With High Noon, it's just one man against three, so he's still technically outnumbered. And in the third act, with like the last, 20 or 30 minutes of the movie, after everyone has turned their backs on Marshall Kane, and Frank Miller has arrived with his posse, with his two other criminals, on the noon train, and it's my understanding that high noon, like the reason why it was called high noon is because at noon the sun is directly overhead, and when the sun's directly overhead at 12 noon, you cannot see your shadow or something like that. Western scholars, feel free to critique me. Feel free to, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments below. I mean, I would like to maybe do more westerns in the future, like maybe Magnificent Seven, Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, But it's high noon. Frank Miller arrives, and Marshall Kane, he has to defend the town all by himself. Getting all the firepower, getting all the guns and ammunition that he can. He single-handedly has to take out Frank Miller and his gang, and it's a really, really nice sort of scene. I get that the movie did come out in 1952, so I feel like, given that it's the 21st century and it's been over 70 years since this movie came out. Yep, this movie came out over 70 years ago, so it's not the same kind of fast-paced action that we're used to. And the movie is entirely in black and white, and the movie is entirely in black and white, and I think they were limited by the budget and the technology of that time. So it's not the same fast-paced, high-octane action that we're used to in the 21st century. That said, I do think that the final 15-20 minutes of this movie is actually pretty iconic. And Marshall Kane, he single-handedly saves the day, saves the town, as everyone was hiding inside. The same people who turned their backs on him in the face of adversity, they then turned around and congratulated him. And the movie ends with, I think, Marshall Kane, he and his wife actually do end up leaving now that the town is safe from evil. And we get a nice little song that's played throughout the movie. I guess the theme song of the movie, High Noon, and yeah, they just kind of ride off into the sunset, and the day is saved.
I can feel the blood creeping up from the heathens. Got will, got fight, got pride, got reason. If they wanna go eat, then I'm gon' feed them. If you're coming for me, hope you're ready for a demon. I got eyes in the back of my head, I'm seeing. Take me for granted and I'm leaving. I'ma take what's mine with the webs I'm weaving. I could take this crowd from seeing to believing. Got a taste for blood and my tongue keeps bleeding.
So this movie deals with themes of standing on your principles and your morals, loyalty, standing your ground, using force when absolutely necessary. One thing that I had learned during my time in martial arts as a child, I studied Taekwondo for about 9 years. And one thing that was instilled in us in Taekwondo, and I think this might be a almost universal rule in most martial arts, that you never throw the first punch. You use it only for self-defense. You use martial arts, you use it for self-defense and for sport only. You never be the one to actually start the fight, but you're the one to end it. And I think that's where Amy Kane's character, Amy Kane, who's the Quaker, she says how we should never use force in any scenario, but then being able to see sort of the gray area where it's not always as black and white. It's like sometimes you need to maybe use a little bit of force if it means survival, if it means saving the town, saving your life, saving the lives of the ones you love, only when absolutely necessary. It should never be your first resort, but your last resort is and should be to maybe use a bit of force only as a means of protection, only as a means of self-defense. So I feel like there's a deeper message in like Marshall Kane doing all that he did for that town and the townspeople electing him as mayor after he fought for them, and then when it was time for them to fight with him, to fight for him and to defend that town, everybody abandoned him. Everyone exited stage left. They hid inside. So at times you got to be willing to, if absolutely necessary, defend, whether that be yourself or your family or the ones you love, even if you're the only one that's actually standing your ground, even if that means standing alone. Yeah, there are times where you must stand up for what you believe in, even if that means standing alone, even if that means the same people that told you that they were for you, now that it's actually time. They said like, oh, like in theory, it's like, sure, ride or die. We're with you. We're with you 100%. If anything were to happen. But then once it actually happens, once stuff actually kind of hits the fan, and it's actually time for them to like stand with you and defend your home or your town and actually stand on their principles, they're nowhere to be seen. That's how life goes. That is how life goes at times. I know that I remember as I was researching this movie, I heard that John Wayne had expressed his distaste for this film given that the movie came out in 1952. It was during the Cold War, and during that whole like Red Scare of the Red Scare of communism, John Wayne called the movie un-American, saying how in real life no American would ever simply abandon their marshal, abandon their post, abandon their leaders. How that would never happen in real life. And then the fact that Marshall Kane just throws a star on the ground. John Wayne, he was very hated and actually kind of resented this film for a while, like when it had first come out. And I personally think that John Wayne was reading too far into it. I think that this movie, yes, it did come out during the Cold War. No, I do not think that it is a propaganda film for American communism. I don't think that that was Fred Zinnemann's intent for this movie to be sort of taken that way and interpreted that way. I would say that, art itself is open for interpretation, and there are times where we will pick up on certain things that was not necessarily the director's intent or the artist's intent, but it's interesting that you picked up on that. But in this particular case, I will say that John Wayne was incorrect.
All right. Here's some music picked just for you.
Oh. My bad, guys. That was this Apple home device that just randomly turned on. So, like I was saying, John Wayne, in this case, he is wrong. I think that this movie, it could have taken place in the Wild West. It could have taken place in the 21st century. It could have taken place 1,000 years ago. 1,000 years in the future, 2,000 years ago. I feel like the theme of standing your ground and loyalty, being loyal to your friends and family and being able to ride for them, being able to ride for them, protect them if absolutely necessary, and just being loyal, having faith, standing on your word, standing on principle. I think those are very universal themes that can apply to any period in human history, across all time periods, across all socioeconomic backgrounds, even across all ages, races, genders. I think that those are just universal human themes. And I will say not everything is propaganda. You know, not everything is propaganda. Not everything's part of like the Matrix, and so I think like when you I think like when we hear about folks like John Wayne, saying like, oh, it's a movie in favor of American communism, like, hey, he's just pounding sand. So, but yeah, definitely check out this film, and again, stand your ground, stay and fight. Do not be a coward in the face of adversity. I think those are like the main takeaways from this film. Main takeaways. On to High Noon Plus. So High Noon won 4 Oscars. It had a total of 17 award wins and 11 nominations total, 4 of which were Oscars. Stanley Kramer was nominated for Best Picture. Stanley Kramer, he was part of the picture in some way. I think he might have been one of the writers or producers. Gary Cooper won the Oscar for Best Actor in a Leading Role. Although Gary Cooper was not present at the award ceremony, John Wayne accepted on his behalf. I think John Wayne's acceptance speech is available on YouTube. Fred Zinnemann was nominated for Best Director. Carl Foreman was nominated for Best Writing of a Screenplay. Elmo Williams and Harry Gerstead won the Oscar for Best Film Editing. Dmitry Tiomkin and Ned Washington won the Oscar for Best Music, Original Song, for the song High Noon, Do Not Forsake Me, Oh My Darling. And Dmitry Tiomkin also won the Oscar for Best Music, Scoring of a Dramatic or Comedy Picture. So this movie definitely got some Oscar nominations. Or Oscar wins. Trivia. In 1951, after 25 years in show business, Gary Cooper's professional reputation was in decline, and he was dropped from the Motion Picture Herald's list of the top 10 box office performers. In the following year, he made a big comeback at the age of 51 with this film. I did forget to mention that Gary Cooper was in his 50s when this movie came out, and I'm pretty sure Grace Kelly was noticeably not in her 50s. She might have been either in her 20s or her 30s, so there's a significant age gap between Gary Cooper and Grace Kelly, both on and off screen. There was some question as to the casting of Gary Cooper, since he was 50 and Grace Kelly, playing his wife, was only 21. Despite this being fairly commonplace for the period in which this film was set, Will Kane was only supposed to be about 30. So again, like I said, Grace Kelly was 21 years young, and here we have Grace Cooper, who's 50, and him playing a character who's only supposed to be about 30. So I understand that everybody got married young back then, but I mean, the age gap. Different time. Lee Van Cleef was originally hired to play Deputy Marshal Harvey Pell. However, producer Stanley Kramer, so Stanley Kramer was the producer, decided that his nose was too, quote-unquote, hooked, which made him look like a villain. and told him to get it fixed. Van Cleef refused, and Lloyd Biggs got the part. Van Cleef was given the smaller role as gunman Jack Colby, one of the Miller Gang. I was going to say, Lee Van Cleef, that name sounds familiar, so he was given a different role. He was one of the supporting characters, Jack Colby, one of the Miller Gang. Fred Zinnemann said that the black smoke billowing from the train is a sign that the brakes were failing. He and the cameraman didn't know it at the time and barely got out of the way. The camera tripod snagged itself on the track and fell over, smashing the camera. But the film survived, and is in the movie. Wow, that is it could have been a lot worse. They just survived. The smoke meant that. Okay, so yeah, now we know that the smoke means that the brakes are failing, and yeah, they got out of the way just in the nick of time. So thank God for them getting out of the way, and the film survived, and it's in the movie. So make sure you go back and watch this movie and look for that scene. Among other accomplishments, the film was a milestone in scoring. It introduced the idea of a theme song to be marketed separately from the movie, and to be a motif for the instrumental score throughout the film. Tex Ritter, John Ritter's father, sang the song "Do Not Forsake Me," whose lyrics are from the point of view of the hero appealing to his new wife, Amy, to stay with him. Okay, so it looks like this movie was like the first movie to have an official theme song, it looks like. Because I guess "Do Not Forsake Me," so I guess the High Noon theme song, the "Do Not Forsake Me, Oh My Darling," is kind of similar to, I was thinking of Rocky 3, and how the I guess unofficial theme song of Rocky 3 is "Eye of the Tiger," and because "Eye of the Tiger" is said periodically throughout the film, and then that's the theme song for Rocky 3, and so it's all right. High Noon, definitely very historic and groundbreaking in that regard. "Do Not Forsake Me" being the first theme song for a film. User review: A Man Who Won't Run Away, 10 out of 10 stars. For me, Will Kane embodies the American ideal of a hero. A man who stands up for what is right, even when nobody else does, even when the temptation is strong to stick the head in the sand. Will Kane explains his outlook at the outset. There is no point in running away if that means spending the rest of your life watching your back. His best chance is to face his enemies on his home ground. At this point, he still thinks that honest folk will stand by him. The rest of the movie is a study in character. Will he stand his ground when his entire world crumbles around him? Is it puzzling that Howard Hawks, John Wayne, and others... It is puzzling that Howard Hawks, John Wayne, and others thought of High Noon as un-American. I am not sure if this is because of the allegory of the McCarthy era, or the people of an American town collectively sticking their heads in the sand, or the marshal throwing his badge to the ground in the last scene. Clearly, the movie does not criticize McCarthyism itself. It has nothing to say about communism either. It appears to criticize the people who did not stand up to McCarthy and the HUAAC, but it can equally well be seen as a comment on the appeasers who did not stand up to fascism or communism. In any case, not too much must be made of this anti-appeasement angle, because the townfolk is not the primary focus of the movie. The focus is on Will Kane. When the townsfolk behave like cowards, that gives Will Kane a chance to prove that he is a hero. If the town had stood by the marshal, we would have seen at best an excellent western like Rio Bravo, but not a masterpiece like High Noon. For Will Kane to be a hero, it is necessary that he stands alone. No statement can convey the dramatic impact of Will Kane throwing his badge away, but it is worth discussing that the gesture we're discussing what this gesture means. For me, it means that the town and the badge were not worth fighting for. Will Kane fought for principle. He fought because he does not run away. Amen. Amen. I completely agree with this user. 10 out of 10. Again, standing on principle. I like how this user pointed out that it wasn't just John Wayne, but it was also Howard Hawks who had criticized High Noon for being un-American. Again, this movie, I think again the themes are more timeless. The themes are more timeless, and I actually hadn't picked up on Will Kane throwing the badge away as like him saying like, this town and this badge are not worth fighting for. I'm going to, I only did it because it's my principle, it's my moral. I never back down from a fight. I never, either I'm going to go down in a blaze of glory. All right. Either I'm going down in a blaze of glory, and I figure that's better than living in fear the rest of my life. There's no shame in losing to an opponent. There's no shame in losing the fight. But there is shame in losing to fear and just walking away. And all the townspeople, they lost to fear. They walked away, So of course, Will Kane's gonna throw his badge on the ground, be like, you guys weren't really for me. You guys weren't really with me when I needed you. So, I'm out of here. The movie has a rating of 7.9 out of 10 on IMDb and a 4 out of 5 on Letterboxd. The movie came out July 30th, 1952. In the United States. The movie is in English as well as Spanish. There's one or two scenes that take place in Spanish. One of the primary filming locations is Railtown 1897 State Historic Park in Jamestown, California. The movie was produced by the production company Stanley Kramer Productions. The movie had an estimated budget of $730,000, which is about $8.6 million in today's money. Gross worldwide at the box office, the movie made about $8 million, which would be the equivalent of about $95 million in today's money. So the movie definitely made a huge profit at the box office, domestically and worldwide. Rotten Tomatoes, tomato meter score 95%, audience score 89%. The critics' consensus, a classic of the Western genre that broke with many of the traditions at the time. High Noon endures in no small part thanks to Gary Cooper's defiant, Oscar-winning performance. I couldn't agree more. I am with the critics on this one, 95%. That it should get a 95% on Rotten Tomatoes. Where can you watch High Noon? You can watch High Noon with a subscription on Prime Video or rent/buy on Fandango at Home and Apple TV. That is all for today's review of High Noon. If you liked what you heard today, then don't forget to give this podcast a 5-star review on all listening platforms. If you're watching this on YouTube, then like this video, share it, click that subscribe button, and turn on post notifications so you get notified when I upload new episodes. If you want to stay up to date on all things Cobbs Corner, then you need to follow me on Instagram, Threads, and TikTok. All that information is in the show notes below. Feel free to email me with any movie suggestions, comments, etc. at cobbscornerpodcast@gmail.com. If you made it to the end of this episode, I greatly appreciate it. Click the video on the screen right now to listen to my last episode where I reviewed Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. And as always, I'll talk to all of you in the next episode. Peace.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.